talk about jumping and landing mechanics. It's really important, especially when you're dealing with back pain, knee pain, hip pain, anything when it comes to trying to manage the discomfort that you feel when it comes to jumping and landing, especially when you're doing something like a box jump or even transitioning into more of the CrossFit related activities like a power clean or even just receiving anything in a catching position. So the idea is that when we're jumping, the focus is actually really using the hips. And the reality is that we cannot generate sufficient force if we keep the knees forward like this. What ends up happening is that we can only generate as much force as we can through our quads. The challenge is that the quads are responsible for extending our knees. They're not responsible for extending our hip. And when we're jumping, we're looking at trying to maximize extension of our hip. And that's going to allow us to get more height, more speed, and also landing in a better position. So the way that you want to think about it, especially when it comes to jumping, whether you're getting yourself ready for a box jump, your hips are going to go back, your torso is going to go forward as if you're ready to jump. But then if you're doing something like a push press or a clean, your power position is going to be sitting your hips back. And it's not just letting your knees forward and having your hips come forward too. It's really a matter of having your hips sit down. And I want you to think about it, it's kind of like the first quarter of any sort of squat. You're not letting your knees drive forward, you're sitting those hips back. And then once you are jumping, the idea is that we're reaching our full hip extension. So if you're jumping onto a box, you're reaching full hip extension to get into a box. Or if you're doing your clean, you're reaching your full hip extension. And that allows you to get fully as upright as possible. Now, when it comes to landing, you want to think about ensuring that your feet are not landing too wide to the point where you're having those knees come in. You also want to avoid this kind of like starfish position that often happens, especially when people are getting into the heavier weights trying to do a power clean. The idea is that either you jump and land in the same position that you were in before, or you land slightly wider, still trying to keep your feet underneath your shoulders. Now, when you land, it's also important that you're absorbing the force through your hips. What that means is that if your knees come forward, what ends up happening is everything kind of falls forward like this, and this is where it starts to become problematic. So you want to think about really jumping and catching with the hips back, and if you are holding onto a barbell, you want to make sure that those elbows are forward and up as well, and that creates that really good, solid shelf, allowing you to receive the bar. So you want to think about, again, when you're jumping, getting yourself ready to line up the hips, but then when you land, really have those hips closed and your knees will end up softening and below. And as a result, when you do this, you're gonna feel a lot better jumping up and even better when it comes to landing.